the last days of Michael Jackson goes behind the scenes with the music legend, sharing exclusive conversations and may have proved to be his fatal flaw.
The vault stood sealed for more than a decade and a half, tucked away from the public eye, preserved like a shrine to one of the most enigmatic figures in modern music history. When the heavy doors finally swung open after 16 long years, the atmosphere was not charged with noise, but with silence. An electric kind of stillness that made every person present feel as though they were trespassing into something sacred. The vault of Michael Jackson, the king of pop, had been unlocked. And in that moment, everyone froze, unable to fully comprehend the weight of what had just been unearthed. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The image of that vault being opened is enough to stir the imagination. The thick steel, the anticipation in the room, and the sheer awareness of what might be inside created an atmosphere unlike any other. This was not just a room filled with documents, tapes, and personal belongings. It was a time capsule, a hidden world that had belonged to one of the most influential artists of all time. Every inch of that vault represented a mystery waiting to be revealed, a mosaic of history that had been locked away since his passing. The silence that followed the opening was not born of disappointment, but of reverence. Those present knew they were standing at the threshold of something monumental. Michael Jackson's vault was not just a storage space, it was a monument to creativity, a private archive where unfinished projects, handwritten notes, and unreleased material rested untouched. The world outside had been speculating for years about what lay inside, but speculation could never compare to the gravity of seeing it with one's own eyes. The sense of freezing in place stemmed from the realization that this was not merely an exploration of objects, it was an encounter with Michael's mind. Every page of notes, every reel of recorded sound, every locked chest within the vault carried the imprint of his genius. To stand in front of that was to face not just an artist's work, but his very soul. There was an understanding in the room that whatever was discovered here would alter the cultural landscape forever. Because Michael Jackson was not an ordinary figure. His influence reached across generations, and every hidden treasure within that vault could expand the boundaries of his legacy even further. The first sight of the vault's contents was overwhelming. Stacks of tapes lined the walls, some labeled in his unmistakable handwriting, others mysterious and left without explanation. Boxes filled with photographs, costumes, sketches, and drafts for performances were carefully arranged yet forgotten over time. There was an almost eerie sense of continuity, as if Michael had just stepped out of the room, leaving behind a fragment of his mind frozen in time. This illusion intensified the sense of awe that washed over everyone who stood there, realizing that the vault had remained untouched for so long yet felt alive with presence. Opening the vault after 16 years also carried implications far beyond curiosity. It was a confrontation with history. For years, fans and scholars alike had debated about the unreleased songs, the unfinished albums, and the hidden performances that Michael might have left behind. Now, the possibility of discovering new material suddenly shifted from rumor to reality. The silence that followed the opening was partly because no one could immediately process the sheer magnitude of what this could mean. New songs could alter the narrative of his career, previously unseen notes could reveal his thought process, and forgotten footage could reshape how the world understood him as an artist. At its heart, the vault represented the unseen side of a man who was always in the spotlight. Michael Jackson was one of the most photographed and documented figures in entertainment history. Yet what lay inside this space was his private sanctuary, a collection meant only for himself until fate dictated otherwise. The world had seen the performer, the dancer, the singer who dazzled stadiums, but within this vault was the creator at his most unfiltered, free from public scrutiny, working purely for the sake of vision. That realization brought with it a heavy responsibility. How much of this private world should be revealed, and how much should remain locked away as part of his personal legacy? The moment of freezing was also a confrontation with the passage of time. 16 years had slipped by since his death, and the vault had waited in silence through all of it. To open it now was to bridge the past and present, to connect with the heartbeat of an era that shaped modern pop culture. It reminded everyone present that legacies are not static. They continue to grow and evolve even after the person is gone. The vault was proof of that. A sleeping giant that had been awakened to show that Michael's influence still had more to give. The significance of opening the vault also lies in the recognition of preservation. Few artists had the foresight to create such a detailed archive of their work. Michael was meticulous, not only in performance but in record-keeping. He seemed to understand, perhaps instinctively, that his creations needed to be safeguarded for the future. By keeping these materials locked away, he preserved a treasure trove for a time when the world might be ready to see more of him. This moment marked that readiness. It was as though the vault had waited until now to reveal itself, allowing anticipation to build to a point where its opening would carry maximum cultural impact. Another layer of this event was the humanity it unveiled. Behind the glittering costumes and carefully choreographed performances was a man who scribbled ideas on paper, who worked tirelessly late into the night, who tried and failed and tried again until his vision matched what he heard in his mind. The vault was filled with evidence of his humanity, drafts, rewrites, corrections, and imperfections that revealed the process behind the perfection. It was humbling, and it froze everyone in their tracks because it showed that even the king of pop was not untouchable, but a man consumed by the drive to create. The stillness in the room was also connected to the knowledge that this opening would ripple far beyond the walls of the vault. Fans around the world had been waiting for years, hungry for anything new related to Michael's artistry. The unveiling of his vault meant that these whispers of unreleased treasures were no longer myth, but reality. Music historians, cultural critics, and fans alike would now shift their gaze to what was discovered inside. The silence, then, was not just awe, but anticipation. The weight of knowing that what came next could ignite a storm of interest and change the way people viewed Michael's legacy. The vault's opening after 16 years also underlined the permanence of artistic impact. Most artists leave behind a body of work, but few leave behind a living archive that continues to breathe long after they are gone. Michael Jackson was not only a performer, but a cultural architect, someone who built foundations for countless musicians who came after him. By opening his vault, the world was reminded that his contributions were not finite. His influence could expand further, offering more insight into his artistry, more fuel for inspiration, and more reasons for people to revisit his work with fresh eyes. It is impossible to ignore the sense of destiny surrounding the moment. The number 16 itself felt significant, as though the vault had been sealed long enough to allow distance and reflection. To open it too soon might have reduced it to a mere spectacle, a way of capitalizing on grief. But after 16 years, the vault became something else, a time bridge, a moment where the world could look back and forward simultaneously. Those who witnessed it understood that history was being altered in real time, and the stillness in their bodies reflected that gravity. The image of freezing captures more than physical stillness. It embodies the recognition that this moment was bigger than any one person. The vault belonged not only to Michael, but to the world, because his art had transcended boundaries of geography, language, and culture. Opening it was not just an act of discovery, but of communion, a way for people to connect once more with someone who had given so much to music and humanity. As the vault's contents began to come into view, there was a recognition that each item told a story. A half-written lyric might reveal an emotion he never expressed publicly. A recording session tape might capture an alternate version of a beloved song, showing how his creative choices evolved. A sketch for a costume might give insight into his meticulous attention to visual storytelling. Every object inside was a narrative waiting to be told, and the weight of those untold stories is what froze the witnesses in silence. Even the air inside the vault seemed charged, as though the energy of his creativity had seeped into the walls and lingered there. It was not hard to imagine him working in solitude, his mind racing with ideas, his hands scribbling notes, his voice humming melodies no one else had heard yet. To stand in that space was to step into his world, to feel for a brief moment what it must have been like to create at the level he did. That sensation of connection, rare and unrepeatable, is what left people unable to move or speak. The act of opening the vault after so many years also underscored the fragility of time. For 16 years, these treasures had been kept safe, but nothing lasts forever. The opening was a reminder that history must be shared before it fades. The objects inside, no matter how carefully preserved, were finite in their physical form. By revealing them now, those responsible ensured that Michael's legacy would continue not only through memory, but through tangible, preserved artifacts that could inspire future generations. The silence that gripped the room was born of respect. Michael Jackson's vault was not just a collection of things, it was a mirror reflecting the essence of one of the greatest artists the world has ever known. To open it after 16 years was to awaken something long dormant, to feel the presence of a man who had left an indelible mark on humanity. The people who stood frozen in that moment understood that they were not just looking at a collection, but at a legacy, one that would ripple outward in ways no one could yet predict. The vault itself became a symbol. It represented secrecy, preservation, and the power of time. It reminded the world that even icons have hidden sides, and that discovery can be as powerful as performance. The opening of Michael Jackson's vault after 16 years was more than an event. It was a revelation, and in that revelation, everyone froze. Not out of fear or confusion, but out of sheer recognition that history was unfolding before their eyes. When the vault door finally gave way and its contents began to reveal themselves, there was an almost tangible sense that the room itself had changed. Time seemed to stop, and the usual rhythm of movement, shuffling feet, shifting weight, adjusting postures, ceased altogether. It was as if every individual present knew instinctively that to disturb that moment with even the slightest gesture would break the spell. The silence was heavy, not because there was nothing to say, but because no words could possibly capture what was happening. The stillness was reverence, awe, and disbelief all woven into one. The very existence of a vault hinted at layers of intentionality. This was not a cluttered attic or a forgotten storage space, but a carefully preserved sanctuary that Michael Jackson himself had envisioned or at least contributed to creating. That fact alone carried implications. To lock something away is to acknowledge its importance, to treat it as something meant for a different time. Michael was no stranger to thinking in terms of legacy. He knew the value of mystique, the necessity of preserving some part of himself for later generations. The vault was more than an archive. It was a statement, a reminder that art often transcends the moment of its creation. For those who bore witness to the opening, the sense of intrusion was almost palpable. They were stepping into a place that had been untouched for 16 years, a place that had been sealed during a time of mourning and guarded by the weight of collective expectation. Every object they laid eyes on felt both intimate and monumental. There were notebooks with scribbles that revealed fleeting ideas, sketches for productions that might have been, and recordings that had likely never been played outside Michael's immediate circle. To see such things was to peer into his inner sanctum, to share in fragments of thoughts he may never have intended to release. That realization pressed down on everyone in the room, rooting them in place. The air itself seemed different. Dust motes hovered in the shafts of light that cut through the vault, and every object bore the subtle scent of preservation. It was not the smell of neglect, but of intentional safeguarding. The weight of time hung on every item, reminding all present that 16 years had passed since Michael had last been alive to touch these things. This temporal gap amplified the silence, for the vault became more than a storage room. It became a bridge to a man who existed as both legend and memory. The implications of opening the vault stretched beyond the physical artifacts themselves. For fans across the world, this moment represented the possibility of reconnection. Michael Jackson was not merely an entertainer, but a cultural phenomenon whose music had crossed boundaries of race, language, and geography. His vault, unopened for so long, had taken on an almost mythical aura. Rumors swirled for years about what it contained: lost albums, unreleased songs, handwritten letters, prototypes of costumes, ideas for performances that never came to be. To finally have confirmation that these items existed was enough to ignite imaginations worldwide. There was also the recognition that this unveiling would alter the conversation around Michael's artistry. For years, critics and historians had debated the extent of his genius, parsing over the work he left in the public eye. But here was an entirely new reservoir of material, untouched and unseen. Each item within the vault had the potential to reshape how the world understood him. Perhaps a song tucked away in one of those boxes would reveal a direction he had planned to take but never did. Perhaps sketches or notes would show a side of his creativity that had been overlooked. The vault promised not just additions to his legacy, but redefinitions of it. The silence that fell over the room reflected another realization: responsibility. To discover such treasures was not simply to enjoy them, but to decide their fate. Should the contents remain private, preserved as Michael's personal sanctuary? Or should they be shared with the world, offering fans and future generations new windows into his genius? That question hung heavily in the air, and the stillness of those gathered revealed how acutely they felt the weight of such decisions. Every gesture, every choice from that point forward would carry immense cultural significance. To stand in front of the vault was also to confront the immensity of absence. 16 years is a long time, yet in the presence of Michael's untouched creations, it felt as though he had only just stepped away. His handwriting on a page, his voice captured on a tape, his fingerprints on a design, all of it conveyed immediacy. The vault was alive with his presence, and in that moment, the witnesses were caught between past and present, feeling both the loss of what could never return and the gift of what remained. As their eyes adjusted to the sight of the vault's contents, the realization deepened that this was not simply about music or memorabilia. It was about glimpsing the private workings of a mind that had influenced the world in ways few others ever had. Every artist leaves behind echoes of their process. But Michael's process was so transformative, so innovative, that even his discarded ideas carried value. To see an unfinished lyric was to witness the spark of creation that could have set the world ablaze had it been completed. To find early drafts of choreography was to catch a glimpse of the physical language that had once redefined performance itself. The cultural implications extended beyond music alone. Michael Jackson was a global figure whose artistry intersected with fashion, film, dance, and social consciousness. What lay inside his vault likely touched upon all these domains. Costumes might reveal his evolving vision for performance aesthetics. Notes could detail ideas for humanitarian projects or messages he wished to communicate through his art. By unlocking the vault, the world was invited not just into his artistry, but into the scope of his imagination, which was never limited to a single medium. The silence also reflected the enormity of Michael's influence. Few figures in modern history have achieved the level of cultural penetration he did. His songs played in villages and skyscrapers alike. His dance moves were imitated by children across continents, and his image became a universal symbol of artistry. To open his vault was to acknowledge that such influence does not dissipate with death. It waits, dormant, until rediscovered. The room froze not only because of what was seen, but because of what it meant, that Michael Jackson's voice still had the power to shape the future. The presence of so much unreleased material carried with it a sense of unfinished dialogue. Michael had always communicated through his art, and each new discovery represented a conversation he had yet to have with the world. Witnessing this moment was akin to being handed a letter written by someone long gone, only to realize that their words still resonated, still mattered. That realization left no room for movement or speech, only for contemplation. There was another layer to the frozen silence: intimacy. For so long, the world had seen Michael through the lens of spectacle. Dazzling performances, massive crowds, headlines, and controversies. Yet here, within the vault, was intimacy distilled into objects. A half-written lyric revealed vulnerability, a sketch showed spontaneity, a personal note offered honesty. To be present in that room was to encounter Michael not as the king of pop, but as a man driven by relentless creativity. That intimacy demanded quiet respect. The very act of preservation within the vault spoke to Michael's awareness of his place in history. He knew that he was not just an entertainer, but a figure whose work would outlast him. To keep such a detailed archive was an act of foresight, a recognition that future generations would look back not only at his finished works, but at the process behind them. This awareness gave the vault an almost prophetic quality, as though Michael had prepared a gift for the future without ever knowing exactly when it would be opened. For those who stood frozen before the vault's contents, there was also the recognition of rarity. Very few moments in cultural history carry this level of significance. It was not just about discovering hidden art, but about standing at the threshold of history itself. The vault was a reminder that some legacies are so immense, they continue to expand even after the artist is gone. The opening was not an ending, but a continuation. Proof that Michael Jackson's influence remained alive and capable of evolving. The stillness, carried another implication: reverence for mystery. Part of what made Michael such a compelling figure was the blend of visibility and secrecy, the way he seemed both everywhere and untouchable. The vault embodied that duality. To open it was to pierce the veil of mystery, but to remain silent was to honor the fact that some aspects of his genius might always remain beyond complete understanding. The silence, then, was not only awe but humility, an acknowledgement that even in revelation some mysteries endure. The act of freezing in that moment was also a recognition of Legacy's power to unite. Those present came from different walks of life: archivists, historians, perhaps members of his estate or close confidants. Yet in the presence of Michael's vault, their differences dissolved. They were united in a shared awareness of significance. The vault did not belong to any one person but to the collective memory of humanity, and its opening was a moment of shared history. That unity demanded silence, for words would have fractured the sense of communal reverence. Beyond the room itself, the implications of the vault's opening stretched outward like ripples on water. The silence was a prelude to what the world would soon feel. Fans would freeze in front of their screens as news of the discovery spread. Musicians would pause to reconsider the roots of their inspiration. Cultural commentators would stop to reframe their understanding of his legacy. The stillness in that room was mirrored by the stillness that would soon radiate across the globe as people everywhere grappled with the magnitude of what had been uncovered. Opening the vault also raised questions about authenticity and authorship. Every artist leaves behind fragments of work that are incomplete, experimental, or never meant for public eyes. Michael's vault contained such fragments, and their discovery forced everyone to ask, how much of an artist's private world should be shared? The silence in that moment reflected not only awe, but caution. To handle Michael's legacy was to handle something fragile, something that could be easily misunderstood or misrepresented if not treated with the utmost respect. There was a sense that the vault had been waiting for the right time. 16 years gave the world enough distance from his passing to see him more clearly, to focus less on the noise of controversy and more on the artistry that had defined him. The vault's unveiling at this moment was almost poetic, as though the timing itself carried meaning. The stillness of those present reflected an unspoken understanding. This was the moment destiny had chosen for Michael's vault to speak again. The frozen silence also conveyed recognition of scale. Michael Jackson's career was vast, his influence immeasurable, and his vault was the embodiment of that scope. To open it was to be confronted with the immensity of his life's work, to realize that what the public had seen was only part of the story. The vault suggested depths beyond imagination, and that recognition stopped everyone in their tracks. The room's stillness was mirrored by an emotional undercurrent of gratitude. To witness such a moment was to be given a privilege. The vault was not just a physical space, but a sacred trust. Those present knew they were being allowed to experience something that millions would only hear about later. The gratitude was quiet, internal, but powerful enough to hold bodies motionless as though any movement would diminish the sanctity of what they were seeing. What made the silence so profound was its universality. No matter what personal feelings individuals had about Michael Jackson, whether they adored him, admired him, or simply respected his impact, they were united in stillness. The vault was bigger than any opinion, larger than any single interpretation. It was history unfolding, and history commands silence. As the vault's treasures began to be cataloged, the stillness gave way to movement. But the memory of that initial freeze lingered. It became part of the story itself, a reflection of the power of presence. To open Michael Jackson's vault after 16 years was to touch a moment so profound that even breath seemed like an intrusion. That moment of silence, shared by all who were there, became the truest testimony to the magnitude of his legacy. When the heavy stillness of the vault finally settled into the minds of those who stood in its presence, another realization began to emerge. This was not only an artistic treasure chest, but a deeply personal testament. Michael Jackson's vault was as much about the man as it was about the music. The longer one stood before its contents, the more apparent it became that this room was not designed to impress strangers, but to preserve fragments of identity. 16 years of anticipation collapsed into a single instant of exposure, and the gravity of that reality forced everyone to reassess what legacy truly means. The vault, in essence, was an autobiography without words. Every artifact was a sentence, every collection of items a chapter. To sift through its contents was to read his life in a language beyond conventional storytelling. Here was a costume prototype not yet finalized. There, a scribbled lyric line abandoned midway through. Elsewhere, a tape of melodies never heard outside his studio. Unlike polished albums and world tours, this was raw and unedited. A story told in pieces, each more revealing than any public performance. That awareness brought forth a kind of reverence that demanded silence. The deeper implication was the intimate scale of genius. Too often, society views icons as finished products, as if their greatness emerges fully formed. Yet the vault shattered that illusion. The rough drafts, the corrections, the alternate takes all revealed that Michael's brilliance was the result of relentless pursuit. He did not simply stumble upon greatness, he built it line by line, note by note, move by move. In seeing these fragments, one understood that genius is not a singular moment of inspiration, but an ongoing process of obsession. That revelation reframed his artistry not as magic, but as labor, elevating the respect he commanded even further. The presence of costumes, sketches, and stage designs hinted at how fully Michael inhabited his art. He did not simply perform songs, he envisioned entire worlds. The vault showed evidence of his capacity to merge music with theater, fashion, and narrative. Each item reinforced the truth that his stage persona was not a mask, but a meticulously crafted extension of his imagination. That he preserved these designs underscored how much thought went into the totality of his expression. For those who stood still in awe, the realization was overwhelming. Every detail of his art had been intentional, and much of it remained unseen until now. Beyond artistry, the vault also embodied vulnerability. In his lifetime, Michael often struggled under the weight of fame, the invasive nature of media, and the misunderstandings of the public. Yet here, in the privacy of his vault, he was free. Unreleased songs might carry raw emotions he never dared to share with the world. Unfinished notes might reveal doubts, confessions, or fleeting moments of personal honesty. The silence of those who opened the vault reflected not only respect, but a cautious hesitation. To reveal too much might expose vulnerabilities Michael had chosen to keep hidden. That tension between disclosure and privacy hung over the moment like a veil. The vault also suggested an artist's instinct for posterity. While it is uncertain how much Michael envisioned the vault as a deliberate gift for future generations, the very act of preservation hinted at his awareness of time. He had lived under the spotlight for so long that he must have known his influence would stretch far beyond his own life. By protecting these fragments, he ensured that his dialogue with the world would continue. This realization transformed the vault into more than a private archive. It became a time capsule designed to ignite inspiration long after his physical presence was gone. The magnitude of this act extended outward into cultural heritage. Michael was not merely an American artist, he was a global phenomenon whose music resonated across continents. His vault, therefore, was not a localized archive, but a world treasure. The stillness in the room was in part due to this awareness. They were not opening something personal, but something belonging to humanity. Every object carried the potential to impact millions, to inspire new generations of dancers, singers, and dreamers. That recognition made silence the only possible response, for noise would have diminished the universality of what lay before them. One of the most striking aspects of this moment was the way it bridged eras. Michael Jackson's career had spanned decades, from child prodigy to global superstar, and his vault encompassed that breadth. Artifacts from different points in his life lay side by side, reminding everyone that he was both timeless and ever-changing. To open the vault was to collapse time, to see the boy who once sang in the Jackson 5 and the man who created Thriller coexisting in one space. The frozen reaction of those present reflected this temporal dislocation. How does one react when the past and present collide so forcefully? The vault also highlighted the intersection of the personal and the universal. For Michael, these were personal notes, sketches, and recordings, intimate expressions of his creative journey. For the world, however, they were treasures, pieces of a cultural mosaic that defined modern entertainment. This duality created tension. Could these items remain both private relics and public artifacts? The silence of those who discovered them reflected this delicate balance. They understood that they were holding not only Michael's secrets, but also the world's inheritance. Perhaps one of the most profound implications of opening the vault was the reminder of mortality. Michael Jackson, despite his larger-than-life persona, was human. The vault was filled not only with brilliance, but with reminders of incompletion, of ideas that never reached fruition. It underscored the truth that even the greatest among us leave behind unfinished stories. That recognition froze the witnesses in place, for it reminded them of their own mortality, their own unfinished narratives. In this way, the vault was not only about Michael, but about the human condition itself. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Michael Jackson's vault being opened after 16 years? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.